Hi, welcome to the Blue Wave Pod. My name's Sohan Manik.
And I'm Eric Heffinger.
And we're coming to you today with our first ever interview on the pod. And it's with Ken Harbaugh, who's the Democratic candidate for the Ohio 7th. And we want to tell you a bit about the Ohio 7th before we get to the interview with Ken. It's a really odd-shaped district for a lot of reasons.
I mean, if you look at this thing on a map, and I know this is a podcast, so I'm going to have to draw this image for you. Paint this in your mind, if you will.
No one does it better than you.
If you are looking at the state of Ohio, and you know where Cleveland's at, it's up at the tippy top by the lake, Lake Erie. This thing starts west of Cleveland, and it's a very thin strip up by the lake, and then it kind of wiggles its way down through a bunch of more rural counties, almost all the way down to Columbus. And then again, it snakes back to the east and goes almost to the edge of Pennsylvania. This is a large swath of land. It covers mostly rural areas, but it sucks up a little urban areas along the way, like Canton, which is a very urban area. But it also avoids some big urban areas like Mansfield. It purposely wraps itself completely around Mansfield just so it doesn't pick up those urban areas for vote. It has been completely built to elect a Republican.
Yeah, as with a lot of areas in the country after the 2010 census, Ohio went through a pretty major restructuring of its congressional districts, and this is certainly one of the cases where the Republicans built a seat that they thought would last them for a very long time.
The guy that currently sits in it is named Bob Gibbs, and Bob Gibbs has been elected to Congress for quite a few years now, and since they recreated the 7th, he has been the congressman for this new 7th district. In recent elections in 2014, he ran completely unopposed. And in 2016, he won 64% of the vote to the Democrats' 29% of the vote.
Yeah, and even though it's hard to forget, 2016, obviously the year that Trump ran, so he did pretty well in this district as well.
It's a very, very safe Republican seat. And early coverage, when we first started off talking to each other about who do we cover, who do we talk about when we're going to do this, the Ohio 7th was on no one's list of a place that can be flipped.
Yeah, there were so many of those websites out there that sort of right after 2016 talked about the districts that Democrats should look to, and the Ohio 7th I don't think appeared on it at first at all.
And that's changed because of a candidate named Ken Harbaugh, which we are going to interview here in a minute. And it really goes to show how much a single candidate can do, because now the DCCC is listing this as a flippable district.
Yeah, and that has a lot to do with the success Ken has had in fundraising so far and the door-to-door efforts. I mean, it's kind of crazy, and you'll hear this from Ken about the efforts they've made going door-to-door already in 2017.
They were a year and a half more out from the election, and they're already going door-to-door, knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, I'm Ken Harbaugh, which is completely unheard of.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But we want to tell you a bit about Ken before you hear from him. He's got a incredible backstory. He was in the Navy. He flew missions for the Navy in the Middle East and in North Korea. Then he went on to Yale Law School. And after that, he joined as president of this organization called Team Rubicon, which if you haven't heard of Team Rubicon, you should, because they do fantastic work. They're an international disaster relief organization. So anytime there's a major disaster in any areas, hurricanes, earthquakes, Puerto Rico is a great recent example of how they've been involved. Veterans join this organization and they go out there and they provide disaster relief and get into areas that a lot of people can't. And it's pretty incredible work, and they're some of the only people that can do it.
What really makes Ken interesting to us here at the Blue Wave Pod is the fact that he has never been politically involved before. He's never run for office before. And yet he's standing up and saying, after 2016, something needs to change. And because of the effort that he's putting out there, it is changing. People around the country are starting to notice this here.
So we really hope you enjoy this interview, and thanks for listening. We're here today with Ken Harbaugh. Ken, thanks so much for joining us again. You know, we hear so much noise about the things that people think voters care about, but you've been on the trail for a while now. And when you're out there going door to door, what do you hear that matters to people?
Healthcare, and healthcare. When I talk to folks around the district, when I talk to my neighbors, when I talk to my family, the thing that keeps people up at night, especially when you dovetail the opioid crisis with it, is healthcare. It is the dominant issue that comes up again and again and again. And as the father of a little girl with special needs, a little girl who needed 4 surgeries before she turned 4 years old, it's deeply personal for me too. We've got to win this fundamental argument about access to affordable healthcare.
And how do you have that conversation, especially in sort of the environment we find ourselves in now, sort of the national news media environment where it's so hard, it seems like positions have hardened and people believe things which may not even have a factual basis, and you go out there. I mean, do you find that on the trail when you're having that conversation?
Yeah, I appreciate the question because it gets to one of the most basic things I've learned on the campaign trail. To answer the first part of the question, you have the conversation by telling a story, by sharing your own personal experience. In my case, scheduling Lizzie's first surgery without having any way to pay for it. It was terrifying. As a family, we were looking down the barrel of a gun. We got lucky. I got a job with a great firm in Cleveland, and they took great care of us. But you shouldn't have to roll the dice to take care of your family, especially when it comes to healthcare. And that is a common theme out there on the trail. And you're right. Sometimes folks don't have all the facts, but Ohioans know in their gut that something is wrong when, as the richest country on earth, we can't find a way to fix this. I was out knocking on doors in Mansfield a couple weekends ago. And, normally, as you might imagine, people are a little wary at first, but it's Ohio, so folks warm up really quickly. And I was having a conversation with a woman. Actually, in this case, it wasn't at the doorstep. It was in her driveway. She was unloading groceries, and I gave her a hand. But she had been a Marine during the first Gulf War Desert Storm, so we hit it off pretty quickly. And she was a corpsman, a medic in the Marine Corps. They're corpsmen. Incredibly proud of her time in the service, wearing her country's uniform. She came back from that and started a home health care business. From nothing, went back to school, got her nursing degree, her LPN, and built this home healthcare business from the ground up, and was just as proud of that as she was of her time in uniform. And then we talked about health insurance for her family and for her workers, and she teared up. She said, I'm a single mom. I got 4 kids. I can barely afford to take care of my own family. When I think about my staff, she has 12 nurses working for her. She said, it breaks my heart because of my 12. Remember, these are people who spend every waking moment in other people's homes. Of my 12, 8 of them have no health insurance of their own. They spend every waking moment taking care of other people. They come home, they can't take care of their own families. People around the district, and I think around the country, feel in their gut that something is broken, and that, we got to find a way to fix this. We're the richest country on earth, and we're the last ones to figure this out. It makes no sense.
I'm a high school journalism teacher, and you just said before you started that story that one of the ways that you connect is through stories.
Yeah.
And that was a very powerful story that you just gave. When I talk to my students, I taught them about the ability of people. They won't remember statistics, but they will remember a moving story. Does that come naturally to you? Are you usually a storyteller, or is this something that you had to learn on the campaign trail?
I think it probably comes naturally to me, at least the way it comes naturally to folks with kids. You communicate with, I tell my kids stories all the time, and what I find with them is that, the way you win an argument, at least in my family, is you tell the better story. You don't always win it with facts, right?
Yeah, you got to create that emotion.
Yeah, people respond emotionally, and they make their decisions emotionally more often than not. And I think that's one of the things that we have to learn in politics, that it's not enough to be right. I mean, you got to start by being right, but you're not going to end by being right. Because one of the things that we have learned the hard way as Democrats is that the high road can get pretty lonely. We might be right on the merits when it comes to issues like healthcare, both in terms of the facts, the objective facts, and then the moral necessity of doing something about these issues of the day. We can be right on all those points, but unless we tell that side of the story in a way that's emotionally compelling, we're going to be right and alone, and that high road is going to stay lonely. So yeah, you got to connect with stories because people are, and I am an emotional being. I mean, that's how we think.
You, when you started getting this idea in your head that you wanted to run, one of the things we want to do here is not only tell the story of the 7th, but talk about what it takes to actually get out there and do this.
Yeah.
So when you started getting this idea in your head, how do you start building a campaign from the idea of like you introducing it to your family?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where does it go from
and especially with someone with no political background or connections just jumping in?
I think that is the most important message to convey, which is there's no magic wand. This is still a democracy. At the end of the day, votes matter most, and what you need more than anything is a passion for it. Anybody can do this. I mean, if you guys didn't catch this already, I'm running in Ohio as a Harbaugh. You don't have to have a certain last name to, and for the record, that's the name of the coach of the Michigan football team.
No relation, we should say.
No relation whatsoever.
I'm pretty sure you're supposed to say the team up north.
I don't think you did.
Yeah. Point being, this is still a democracy. It still belongs to the voter, not the donor. And anybody can do this. It just takes passion and hard work. And, I got that in spades. And with a little luck, I guess, although I don't chalk a lot up to luck, we've come a heck of a long way. I think the biggest ingredient of our success has been passionate volunteer base, people who believe in it as much as we do and are willing to sacrifice for it. We've got hundreds of folks out there helping us in the district. We've knocked on thousands of doors, and we're a year out. That doesn't happen normally, but something epic is going on in Ohio, and we are the front lines of this transformation in our politics nationally. It's inspiring. It's humbling to be a part of.
I love that phrase, the front lines, because I think that's so true. I mean, when we talk about what after Trump and sort of the conversation we need to have in this country, it's places like this more so than, New York City or even in Cleveland in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is how do you go about having that conversation when you're facing a district that is cut in such a way and you have an opponent who, isn't even bothering to kind of engage? Do you just go out there and go to the voters and make your case? Or,
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the opponent in a race like this is the least relevant variable. It's about our positive message. I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on Bob Gibbs, but you've got a guy who's just been keeping the seat warm. He's never held a town hall. I used to say rhetorically that he hasn't done anything for the folks who sent him to Washington. I had someone on my team look at the actual numbers, and it's literally true. He's attached his name to something like 15 pieces of legislation, 5 have left committee, 0 have become law. It's actually hard to get that little done as a congressman. But our message is about solving problems and getting things done and working across the aisle. And our mantra is country over party and service above self and opportunity for all. And that is striking a chord, especially this country over party idea. Because what we're finding on door after door after door and conversation after conversation is that people are sick and tired of party politics, of politicians answering first to their party and then to their country and constituents. They're tired of it. They are tired of it, and they're looking for anyone who can, with some credibility. And I'd like to think my record in the Navy and as president of Team Rubicon give me that credibility, can show that they've actually lived up to this ideal of country over party and not just pay it lip service.
And you mentioned that energy on the streets that sort of seems unprecedented even in a place like the Ohio 7th.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of seen that because, when we started going, especially after 2016, to these newly constituted or reconstituted city clubs and saw how many new faces, including me, I just moved back, and you see sort of how many people wanted to get involved, but no one really knew what that meant.
Yeah.
And so I guess
I went to an event probably a week after the 2016 election, and it was at just somebody's house here in town. And there was probably like 75 Democrats that showed up. And I volunteered on the local campaigns and stuff, and I didn't see these people before, but immediately they were showing up, and there were people there that were just saying, I've got to run, I've got to run. I mean, J.R. Russell just ran for judge. Mm-hmm. He lost because he had a D next to his name, and that's what happens here in Medina for the most part. But he went out there, and he was making his stance and saying, we have to compete in everywhere, doing everything. And I think a lot more people stopped and actually talked to him than what people originally thought at the beginning. I mean, he didn't win in the end, but it's a step in the right direction, I think, to get those people on the ballot. And I see that around here is they're running, they're doing something.
I guess the question is, how do you harness that energy, right? Because I feel like a lot of people have short-term memories these days. And, I think right after Trump got elected is a good example. I mean, I remember going on the Women's March protest, and right after the Muslim ban came in and everyone was on the streets, and you don't really see that much happening anymore. And I don't know how you keep it sustainable, and you hope it is, because 2018 is so important, and then going forward, 2020 as well.
I feel that energy still. I think it is sustaining. It's also bringing other folks in. At least, and I'm being conservative here, a third of the people who show up at our rallies, at our events, have never been engaged before. So it's way more than just attracting lifelong Democrats out to these events. That's not enough to fix our democracy. It might be enough to revitalize a moribund party, but we have a higher calling than that, and that is to repair our politics. And to do that, we have to speak to everyone, or almost everyone. And I see folks coming out who've never been engaged before, and to me, that's the most hopeful sign. It's the fact that people all over the 7th, all over Ohio, and I'd like to think all over the country, are realizing that, you know what, 2016 will keep repeating itself unless we accept some ownership for our own democracy. It's up to us, and that's why I say with total sincerity that I've never been prouder of my country than I am now, because of that, because of what I see out there on the front lines, people stepping up, many of them for the first time. I've never been prouder of my country, which is saying a lot as someone who's led some pretty amazing Americans as an aircraft commander in Team Rubicon. But I see the best of America every day when I'm out there in the Ohio 7th.
And I'm curious about I wonder about the messages that you have to send to voters, because one of the things I think we've seen in the Democratic Party, sort of the old guard and the people who are getting involved, is that this sort of Bernie-Hillary split is still kind of there in terms of people who wanted the Democrats to have a much more progressive message. We were talking to a voter just last week who, is a liberal in the district, and after Trump got elected, feels even more liberal and kind of wants someone to sort of take the mantle of progressive ideas even further. But when you're running in a district like this, it's kind of difficult to do that for a lot of reasons, but also you want your message to be broad, and I think that's what you sort of hinted at with the country over party one. But do you sort of have to, what would be your message to both sides of the Democratic Party to sort of bring it together?
To be perfectly honest, it's not been a significant challenge for us here in the 7th. I hear a lot more of that talking to folks running in other parts of the country, but I think one of the reasons that we have such a coalescing of support here from Senator Brown on down, from the grassroots on up, is that in a district like the 7th, unlike in some where you still have these real divisions, in a district like the 7th, the stakes are literally life and death. It's not hyperbole. It's literally a life and death election in a place like the 7th, where on a weekly basis, people come up to me. Wasn't long ago. A woman came up to me and said, "Ken, you have to win because I just buried my only son. We were on a waiting list for 3 months for a bed in a heroin treatment facility because we were told the funding just wasn't available. And 2 weeks away from getting his slot, he overdosed. The stakes are life and death when you look at the gutting of funding for rural clinics, for treatment centers. I had another mom come up to me and say, "Ken, you got to win this because I got twin boys with orphan illnesses, the kind of illnesses that there aren't great options for, and like my own daughter, they're going to be uninsurable until they turn 65 and are eligible for Medicare if the other side wins." It's a life or death election in a district like this, and there's really no patience for relitigating 2016 or for the kind of internecine warfare on our side that in a past cycle might tear Democrats apart. We're rallying because the stakes are so high.
On your website, it focuses on values.
Yeah.
A typical political website focuses on issues. I think you're hinting towards that a lot here, but I'm curious why you feel that that's where you want to go. Not like the issue,
yeah,
right? But what do you really value as a person? Why do you focus on that?
I mean, it's a theory of leadership, I guess. I am running to earn people's trust because I know that decisions will arise in Washington, should I be honored enough to become elected, where I'm going to have to apply my judgment, my values, to make a kind of decision that I'm not going to be able to poll every one of my constituents on. And they need to make an informed decision about candidates based on those candidates' values, based on their fundamental values, what they believe in, what's in their hearts, because the exercise of governing, of legislating, is one that needs to be value driven. Otherwise, we'd have computers do it.
That's fair. One thing that's sort of near to me, and I think to you as well with your background and experiences, and something that you may be a part of if and when hopefully you're in Congress, is America's international standing. I mean, I think one of the problems is that both sides have cast the other side as hurting America's standing in the world and what it means to be American, sort of that mantle of being, leaders of the free world. Do you think that's in danger now, more so than in the past, or do you think that's sort of overblown? And how do we maintain that type of leadership that we've always been known for?
I think it's more in danger now than at any time since the end of World War II. And I think any objective observer of geopolitics would say the same, because we have, at least this administration, has intentionally walked away from our commitments, from our allies, has in some cases intentionally undermined our authority on the kinds of issues that directly implicate our standing in the world. I think that's incredibly dangerous long term. I think a great example of that was in the original proposal to gut funding for the State Department by 30%. I mean, how unbelievably nearsighted is that? And I say this as a military vet who realizes, as should the current leadership of this country, that the State Department is there to prevent wars, that military force should be the last resort. In fact, General Mattis, I think, put it quite clearly when he said, if you're going to cut the State Department by 30%, you better buy my military a lot more bullets, because that's what happens when you gut funding for diplomacy, for every tool of foreign policy that should be applied before the application of military force.
Out in the field, when you're talking to people, you have a lot of foreign policy experience, being between the Navy, your work, and then your work with Team Rubicon. Do you see that being a big thing people want to talk about out there?
Increasingly. Yeah, and that's a really hopeful sign in the sense that folks really do appreciate that what happens in the South China Sea, what happens off in North Korea, actually does affect what's happening right here at home. It's another one of these incredibly reassuring reminders that that voters are paying attention, that they really are, and they're going to hold this Congress, this government accountable.
One last question, it's a two-parter for you.
Away.
So far, best thing you've experienced in the campaign trail, and the worst thing you've experienced.
But please be honest.
You got it. Best thing I've experienced is absolutely knocking on doors and just getting to know folks in their own homes. I will confess that
you're in my home right now.
No. As far as the team is concerned, I am the worst person on the whole team to knock on doors with, because I will blow my numbers in the very first conversation. We're supposed to hit 20 doors in a certain time period, and I'll spend 45 minutes talking with a single voter or a single family. But I just love it. We were in I'm trying to remember. We were in Canton not long ago, and door one, which was supposed to be door one of 40 that afternoon, ended up being the only door I knocked on. It's Ohio. People are friendly. They want to open up. They want to tell you what they're hopeful about, what they're angry about, what they want to see changed. And I'll never say no to a warm cup of hot chocolate on a cold weekend afternoon. Those have been by far my favorite moments. The toughest ones have been those moments where I got to make a tough call, and it sounds harder than it is. But there is a lot of time away from the kids, and I'm a dad and a family guy at heart, and thank God I have three kids who get it and who understand the stakes. And during parade season, those are pretty good weekends, because we're all out there together and we have a great time. So we make up for it. But there are some lonely moments.
Well, we can't tell you how happy we are that you're making this sacrifice. It's obviously really important, and we know how much it takes.
Thanks for coming in again, Ken. And we really look forward to following your campaign and hearing from you again.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Real pleasure. Let's do this again.
Thank you for listening to the first episode of Blue Wave Pod.
And for our next two episodes, we hope to bring you two pretty different viewpoints. First, we're going to be talking to a liberal government worker who now lives in the heart of Trump country. And second, we're going to be talking to a member of the Air Force who has pretty strong religious beliefs and really uses them to inform his value system. And we dig deep into what drives him to vote the way he does. And spoiler alert, and I know Eric is thrilled about this, there are llamas involved in both episodes.
The llamas. Okay. And if you're not listening to us, you can always follow us on Twitter at Blue Wave Pod or on Facebook at Blue Wave Pod.
You love llamas.
Something like that.